a moment in its curtains. This next attack's gonna be huge. Catch it and send it right back where it came from. Wow. Very nice rebound. Looks like that really The enemy's weak. Go! You're in the final stretch now. Keep going. You've almost won.
Impossible! Darn you!
Before I get started on this, I want to put a disclaimer on almost everything I will say. That is, this might be an early extreme fight, and thus could be easier and lacking some mechanics that later ones could have. Also, I know this is the beta, so there could be some beta issues that are going on. We don't actually know what build of the game they're giving us. Got it? Good, because repeating that all the time would get really tiring. So, how are the extreme fights? Well, the first one I did, we almost died. Everyone was basically on their last legs, and there were multiple revives. Good stuff. Had some tension and made me more defensive in the later fights I did. As I got more used to the fight, I got more aggressive and more into it and things like that. Of course, the more I got used to it, this is the same for the other people I played with, thus the fight got easier. Which, is to be expected. So, as you can probably tell from the disclaimer, there are some problems. Aside from the explosive wave when Vegeta gets up, there weren't any real attacks that made the fight harder than charge key and spam attacks. Speaking of which, remember to move away when his stamina is close to refilling. I've seen way too many people eat that attack. So, what would I like to see here? Well, how about some darkness that appears near characters that would explode to deal damage? Just something to keep people on their toes and needing to stay aware of more than just keep shooting the boss. We do see some of this with the explosive wave, but there needs to be more. The explosions could even be random and not necessarily target players. The important thing here is we just need basic attacks that aren't tied to the big mechanics that the fight have, but just little AoE things or little attacks here and there that make staying back and shooting not necessarily the best way to approach the fight. Heck, you could even do something where the boss, if you're a certain distance away, will do more damage and require you to get in closer. Imagine if you're fighting Broly and he forces you to stay close to him, otherwise he'll unleash some terrible attack that could do extreme amounts of damage unless you're right up in his face, which is, of course, probably the worst place to be when you'd be fighting Broly, considering how he just wants to sit there and punch you. Another problem was it just wasn't punishing enough. True, they do take away the ability to use items, but unless a great deal of the team gets KO'd at once, people will get revived and move on. This is tied into the first point, of course, but I do think I should have lost my first fight. We had 3 people KO'd at one point, and just one person was able to distract the boss long enough to get everyone else back up. You could say that it was played well, and I wouldn't argue that it was, and it did make the fight more fun winning by the skin of our teeth like that, but that was the only time. I know odd that I would have been happier if I'd lost the fight, but that's how it goes. I did lose one, but that was due to what I assume was disconnections and not people leaving. More on that later, though. In terms of the mechanics, he barely did the mind control, and people were quick to snap the other person out of it when it did come up, so not much to comment on that one other than good job people for paying attention to the mechanics and doing the fights correctly. The big one that comes up is the giant ki blast. This thing is weird. You're supposed to catch it and push it back, which uses stamina but regenerates ki. So of course you fire off an ultimate at it before grabbing it. The problem is that instead of a struggle, you just sort of stop it until you do enough to win and then it flies back at the boss. It would have been so much better if it acted like a real beam struggle and the bar would move as you attacked it until you're able to push it all the way back, rather than just keeping it in check until you do enough to win. Of course, if you let up on the attack for any period of time, the boss could start pushing it back at you. You know, like a real struggle where you have to keep constantly attacking it, manage your resources well, not just hold it in place until the attack decides to move. The lack of any feedback during this struggle really makes me wonder if I'm doing what I'm supposed to during this part. This is a fairly fun mechanic, and failure is very punishing, but the lack of feedback and having it not act like a real struggle takes away from it. Taking away the ability to use healing items had 2 negative consequences. The first is that any mistake you make will stick, which is punishing in the wrong way. The challenge should come from skill, not asking the player to be perfect for a long time. The second is Namecs are better at using items than other races, and that's just negated here. Pretty lame having part of your character just flat out ignored and made useless. From this, healing Z-Souls are going to be very useful in these fights. I suppose maybe they thought being able to use healing items would make the fights too easy, but if you consider that each person can only have 4 items max, you could throw in status effects and such in later fights, and the 4 item slots would need to be thought of ahead of time for each different fight. In addition, having a Namek that can act as a strong healer would make them very useful for these fights, and add more character diversity and incentivize people to play as Nameks too. Bringing back the disconnections. Yeah, the system right now is a bit bad. Now it could just be a weird beta thing, but basically what happened is their characters just sat there being invincible, so the boss couldn't kill them, which meant once the few people who were left got killed by the boss, we just had to wait for the timer to tick down or quit and take a lever penalty. Again, this might just be from the beta screwing up, but if not, there are ways to fix this. Just drop the characters so they're not there. Have the AI take over for them. Allow the other players to quit without penalty, or put in an abandoned quest option for those who are left. See? Lots of possible options. So I'm currently not going to judge all of these fights or the game based on the one I was able to do in the beta, but so far, disappointed. The fight is harder than the normal giant fights, but the fight itself is basically just spam attacks at them anyway. Once in a while, you'll need to stop a giant ki blast, which is fun, but other than that, the fight was almost like fighting a normal Grade 8 character. So yeah, more just normal general mechanics of different attacks to make people think on their toes, and require more skill than just shoot the monkey until it dies. Still, the fight was more fun than fighting the normal Grade Apes, so this is a nice improvement. But it could be so much more. I will of course look at these fights in greater detail once the full game comes out, but for now I'll say This was one of the more fun fights in the beta, and I'll certainly be playing more of these quests once the full game comes out. So that wraps up this video, and there'll be more coming soon. Till then, see ya.